most people, they don't actually have business problems. The core constraint is actually something different. And I think this is gonna stretch your thinking a little bit. So I created this to really illustrate the best game to play, right? We've been talking about this idea of pay to exist. We have a natural counterpart to this model, which is pay to perform, right? Because the way most people orient, they don't actually realize that they have a choice. They don't have a choice in the matter because they're operating at the level of survival. And there's no actual solution to that because money doesn't actually solve for that. Because survival is a state of the system. It's not a reflection of a bank account. You know, I work with people running businesses doing a couple of $1 million to a few $100 million. And I promise you, money is not going to solve a lot of the problems that most people think money will solve. So I call this the harmonic triad, and this is my framework around how to actually build the most extraordinary business that you can build, how to see your business, not just as a thing you do, but as a work of art, and how to feel insanely turned on and become disgustingly rich without having to trade meaning for money, without having to choose between serving a calling and doing stuff that lights you up and getting paid really well for it. The classic business paradigm, it teaches people to start with money, right? The paid to perform business is starting with the market. What's going to sell? What does the market want? What can I create, right? What's the offer that will convert? What's the funnel? Even at a content level, the things people say on social media, you can feel the performance because you can feel the starting question is, what can I say that will get me attention, right? What can I say that will elicit a certain response from the market and they will like me more, they will they will comment, and maybe they'll even decide to pay me money. And that can work. It works to a certain extent. It's the fastest path to certainty, to cash. And at a certain level of consciousness, it doesn't actually create dissonance, right? There's a class of people where they're operating, that's totally enough. And uh, uh, I haven't gone super deep into this trend that's setting the internet on fire, which is retard maxing. But my have you heard of this? My guess is that,
Yeah.
it's this idea of just don't think too much about it, just do it. This model is not for retards because retards shouldn't use this model because this requires a lot of nuance. And actually, this model will create more dissonance for them. This model is for the people who feel a lot of dissonance getting paid to perform. They can feel like the business that they're running, even though it's making money, feels like having a pebble in the shoe, right? It feels like a betrayal of self because it doesn't allow them to fully be them. It doesn't allow them to fully do the thing that turns them on and feels like play. They don't feel this deep level of joy and devotion to the thing. So they have to David Goggins their way in their business. The dominant model of business, which is pay to perform, is it's built from this base level, like root level fear, performance, need for approval, need for validation, compensation, survival. And it starts with the external world and it tries to reverse engineer a profitable business around that. And then the founder reverse engineers a profitable identity around that, right? It's like, who do I need to be? What character can I play? So I can make money and so I can receive all these things. The paid to exist business begins somewhere completely different, right? And in this model, it begins with God. And for some, that's triggering. And for some, that's, I thought we were talking about business. Like, what the fuck is this? Um, Great. Bring all the things that are coming up and put it on the table because this is not God as dogma. This is not God as religion. This is not God as spiritual or moral performance of some sort. This is God as source, God as the source of all creation. And um, I don't even think of God as like a being or anything like that, and certainly not from a religious context. God is just the field through which everything arises. It's the intelligence behind creation, right? It's the source of infinite possibility. And what I'm saying is both a spiritual representation of God, but it's also a mathematical and physics-based representation. This is the architecture of creation. And there is, if you look at everything in the cosmos, there is an underlying order to it. There is a design to this universe, right? There is a, a harmonic order that underlies reality. And that's the original frequency, the source frequency through which everything arises. And in this model, God sits at the top of the triangle because God is a source frequency that orders everything around it. God is an algorithm. And when we align with this algorithm, it reorganizes everything inside us and around us. It's also the most intelligent mathematical function there is in the universe. And it's literally quite retarded to separate oneself from it. Because God is the highest level of intelligence that's available in the universe, right? And it's available to us to connect to and to allow our consciousness to be ordered by something higher. And I mean this in a very, very physical, tangible way. Like when you connect to this frequency, your nervous system settles, your mind becomes coherent, the signal you're meant to broadcast becomes clear, your body feels safe, you feel like you're held by something bigger. You feel like the entire cosmic web of creation is conspiring in your favor. You come to a state of ease. You come to a state of alignment. You come into a state of aliveness, right? It is the source of energy. It is a limitless source of energy. So we have to understand that God creates coherence. It aligns us. It aligns us inside, but it aligns us to something greater. And when we are in that state of coherence, the natural result is turn on, right? Turn on is energy. It's life force. And it's not just sexual arousal, though that is one expression of it, because that is what creates life. So any act of creation requires turn on. Turn on is creation energy. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to make money, very, very convenient and useful to have access to turn on, right? Yet most people, they don't seek that, right? Turn on is desire moving through the body, right? Turn on is what creates an electrifying vision. Turn on is what is a much better fuel for us to move with and through. It's God energy becoming embodied. When someone is disconnected from God, then that desire becomes distorted. And we see this as that desire becomes craving, grasping, addiction, comparison, giving, um, like compulsive ambition. Like we saw the video that Hormozy deleted, which kind of revealed the source of everything he does, right? Not turn on. I don't know the guy. Maybe he is widely turned on. But when someone is connected to God, this energy creates direction. It becomes signal. It becomes creative intelligence. It becomes the felt sense of this wants to be created through me, right? That's turn on. It's God moving through the body as creative impulse. And when that creative impulse is channeled into form, into offers, into content, into what you deliver, into art, into products, into a container, into experiences, into a community, into transformation, right? Into a business strategy, into a vision for your most extraordinary life. Like that's it becomes value. And value, when value is received by the market, they give you money in exchange, right? So money is not separate from God. And when you make money this way, you make turned on money instead of turned off money. The best thing about turned on money is not just how good it feels to make it, but when you make turned on money, it creates more turn on, which makes you more money, right? Money is not a a thing that is separate from God and that is not a spiritual thing. It's not dirty, it's not a lesser impulse, it's not less sacred, right? Money is the materialized receipt of creative energy that you source from God that you channel into service. So in this model, it's God first, which orders consciousness that generates turn on animates creation, and then the money confirms the exchange of value. That's the harmonic triad, right? God is the source, turn on is the current, and money is the circulation. Money loves to be circulated. Money wants to move. Money wants to move through you. And you can become a vessel for money to move through you. And if you learn how to do that, then money will flow to you and through you. And that's why a paid to exist business is not built by chasing money, right? What we try to do is we try to circulate energy. We stay connected to source, letting that connection create more aliveness in us. And then we give that aliveness a structure through which it can serve and receive, right? So this is a much, much, much more intelligent model to construct a business around, right? Because we don't want to choose between these things, which is what most people are doing, right? They get one at the expense of the other. To get more of one thing, they have to, let go of the other or betray the other. This is not a linear model. This is a regenerative loop because the deeper your connection to God, the stronger the turn on. The stronger the turn on, the more potent your creation. The more potent your creation, the more value you generate. The more value you generate, the more money you receive, and the more money you circulate. The more money you circulate, the more resourced you become, and the easier and stronger your relationship to God, to source, right? So turned on money becomes a flywheel. It's not money that comes from depletion. It's not money that comes from self-betrayal. It's not money that comes from manipulating, performing, or contorting yourself into what the market wants. We're not saying no to the market's needs and desires, but we're constructing a very precise architecture that allows us to meet those desires in a very specific way that generates asymmetric turn on for us. That is the only way to have purpose, play, and profit, right? Which to me is the holy grail. That's the whole thesis of a paid to exist business, because we want our business to be an economic expression of the way God moves through us, right? And we channel that energy into value that the market's really happy to pay for. So the business becomes an architect or a prism through which this creative energy enters the world, it serves others, and then it returns as money. So that makes money not the goal, but the circulation mechanism, right? If we make money primary, if we orient the entire business around money, we separate from the other two variables, right? The only way to have it all is to approach it in this way. Money is just the evidence of your creative potential, right? That's the market saying, yes, more of this. In a paid to perform business, the order is reversed. They start with the money, right? And then they see what the market wants. That's ideal. Most people don't even do that, right? They're forcing their desire onto the market. That's why Y Combinator, arguably the best startup incubator in history, has a very simple motto, which is sell what people want, right? That's probably the simplest, most profound line in business. So this allows us to let go of the extractive model. And I say extractive, not just because the way some people operate, they're trying to extract something from the market to meet their needs, but extractive because they're building a business that extracts their life force. And you see these people after a few years of running their business, they're basically a shell of like what a human being should be, right? If your business doesn't fill you with more life force, it's probably misaligned. And this is a devotional relationship to what you're creating, right? So a paid to perform business creates entropy. This creates coherence. One drains the founder's life force. This turns the founder's life force into the central economic engine, which becomes an incentive structure for them to experience more life force, right? So growth comes from a greater level of coherence rather than increased force. So the traditional scaling model is, okay, I have this thing. To make more money, I just have to do more of this thing and push it harder. This generates growth and scale from a greater level of harmony because that makes the signal more pure. And we just talked about this, right? It's coming into a greater level of integration and alignment internally with what wants to be created through you. So if we miss one of these variables, we kind of miss the plot, right? There's people who really prioritize God without the turn on and without the money, which becomes dissociation. That's the kind of, spirituality that floats above life. They talk about surrender, but they avoid desire because they feel allergic to it, right? They want connection to God, but they refuse what an embodied connection actually looks like. You can also have turn on without God or money, right? You see those people as well, and that's just chaos. That's raw desire without the devotion or the structure to order it. So that shows up as indulgence, addiction, seduction, chasing novelty, creative bursts, right? There's energy, but there's no order to that energy. There's no architecture. There's desire, but there's no devotion to stabilize it. So that can feel exciting, but it's not a structure that feels trustworthy for the person or the people outside them. And then you have, of course, the favorite combination for society these days, which is money without God or turn on, right? And that's extraction because that's the standard business world. We optimize everything, we monetize everything, we scale everything, but you can feel the absence of soul. The founder can make money, but they lose aliveness. It comes at a cost, right? That's turned off money. The business works, but on some level they hate it or it just doesn't feel right. And that's why people build these amazing companies that look great and successful on the outside, but on the inside, it's kind of dead or it feels like a prison. Not that much different than a fucking job, right? A job is where you're just paid to perform. And so you can see how retarded it is to then go build a business to have freedom and then build another structure that imprisons the person where they get paid to perform, play a role, or do something that they don't really want to do. So this is not just a philosophical framework, but this is actually the blueprint for the most profitable business you can build, right? This is the most commercially and economically superior business you can build because when you are connected to the source of all creation, when you let that turn you on and when you let that determine how you make money, you make better decisions, you experience less noise, less resistance, less anxiety, less self-doubt, less overwhelm. You also mimic less, right? There's a lot less mimicry because most people, whether it's on social media or, in the business world, the whole thing is a fucking pyramid scheme built on mimicking someone else, either mimicking someone else's model and strategy or mimicking how they show up. That's why, like, there's, tons and tons of Alex Hormozy clones. Like, you see this on YouTube, someone pops off and then everyone replicates what they're doing, right? Mimicry will always be a suboptimal function. We also see this as, this desperate pivoting. It's like someone tries something, it doesn't work. So they go try something else and they try something else and they're just like a fucking pinball machine. Or building someone else's business. Like you see, oh, this worked for them. If I replicate the same thing, it'll work for me. It might work, but it probably won't give you all three of these variables. It's not going to be a work of art. It will not be your paid to exist, right? But when you are connected to source and you feel turned on, and the structure, the architecture of your business is built specifically to increase your turn on and increase your connection to source, you create from a place of aliveness. Your content gets better, your offers get better, you have more energy, your the vibes are better, there's better leadership, better client experience. Your brand, your presence on the internet feels more magnetic because people can feel that, right? So that's the game we want to play, right? And in a way, to me, this is not rocket science, right? It's actually quite simple, but simple is not easy because we have to get beyond the programming and the conditioning that requires us to abandon our intuition, abandon what we know, abandon what we came here to do just to make money, right? That's the traditional model where I must spend my life force to get money, right? In the paid to exist model, the harmonic triad says my life force, when it's ordered by God and it's expressed through service, naturally becomes money. The more turned on I feel, the more money I make, right? This is because we get paid because our existence has become highly ordered, highly alive, highly valuable, and highly transmissible. So your life becomes the source of the signal. Your devotion to this operating hierarchy becomes the strategy, right? Your turn on becomes the engine, and your business becomes a structure that allows people to enter your field to receive value and then pay you tons of money, right? So this is the thesis. And the most profitable thing you can do, the way you can architect your business for the most amount of enjoyment to maximize both profit and play as well as purpose, is to find this triad for yourself, right? God, turn on money. God, turn on money. God being the source of order, turn on being this current of creation, and money being the circulation of value. And that money will create more space, more safety, more joy, more ease, more resources, and more beauty, and give you so many more ways to connect even more deeply with God, which increases more coherence. It increases turn on. It increases like what you feel called to create, not just in the volume of it, but in the beauty of it, the elegance of it, which is insanely asymmetric. And that makes you so much more valuable, which makes you so much more money, right? So that's the regenerative loop. And that's what I want to put on the table as like, in a way, there are no business problems. There is just a lack of alignment to these principles. And when you allow yourself to become the vessel, the pipe through which source creates, serves, and receives, then you will make absolutely, I was going to say ungodly, but godlike amounts of money while having more fun than you can imagine and feeling more purposeful and more fulfilled and experience more meaning than I think, you know, was ever considered possible or even fathomable by the past version of you. This is the most important starting point because this is the source code of your business, literally the source code, right? If we're not starting with this, we're just, you know, optimizing downstream variables, and we can spend the rest of our life doing that. And it'll still not produce what you know you're capable of.
In the last video you posted, you were talking to John, I think about something like this, where you were telling him about this that we a lot of us have a submissive relationship to money and that we're chasing the money instead of having it chase us.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about that the more creative he felt, that he felt like the money started was like coming towards him. It's really cool how to see the how it just flows all together and it just reinforces it. It makes a lot of sense. What I resonated most with, what I resonated most with was about turned on money and turned off money and how different they feel. How when I get paid to do something I really don't care about, it's just it feels completely different. And it doesn't make me want to keep on going. It doesn't matter how much money I get paid to make some stupid video or whatever. If it's not something I'm like I watch and I'm like, fuck yeah, this is cool, then I don't care and I don't want to like keep going. So that hit for me.
The core organizing principle of a paid to exist business is around maximizing the founder's time and contact with what I call their core life force generating activity. We all have this one thing, right? And you can have multiple things, by the way, right? But I can safely say that everyone has at least one thing that feels that way. Like what Harry was saying, they get lit up, they're energized, they're turned on, they feel alive, they feel the juice, right? And that's when they feel the most themselves. That's their highest expression. So we have to design the business to maximize the time that we spend in those states. And what I find for every entrepreneur, there's one or two things that generate the most amount of life force for them, that generate the most amount of energy. And if we can build it so that that thing, that activity generates value, then we create an economic incentive structure to do more of that. And that becomes the asymmetric function that the whole thing is designed on, right? This is why most people, the pay to perform business is so existentially fucked because people start with an identity, right? I'm a consultant. I run a Facebook ads agency or whatever. You know, I coach people in this way. And that's fine. It's great if that is the thing. For me, it actually ends up that's one of the things. Like this for me is my core life force generating activity. So it makes sense for me to build as much around this as I can. And this is my flywheel because like what I shared with you guys, like I didn't get that much sleep last night. And this is what I woke up thinking about. And this is what gave me a crazy level of turn on. And this is what I'm bringing to you. And this is what becomes content. And this is what becomes delivery, right? What makes this my core life force generating activity is that,
And what pieces of it? Because you're doing a lot of. So I'd love to like what pieces of this, or what is it about this? Is it the container? Is it your like? I'll let you take that.
yeah, it's everything. It's the container, it's who else is in the space, and it's the relationship between those entities, and it's the nature of the activity. So for Jeet, it could be that his core life force generating activity is building products, right? Locked up in a room. He has his cup of coffee. He takes his nootropics and he fucking locks in and he's so juiced up because leverage gives him a massive hard on. Like he gets so erect at the idea of leverage, right? He's like, man, like I, the idea that the work I'm doing right now is gonna like impact 1,000 businesses and make me millions of dollars for the next decade, like it makes him irrationally horny. So it actually makes sense for him to organize the entire business to maximize his time in that space, right? Because that's when he's most connected to God. That's when he is most juiced up. And if he creates the business architecture that turns that into value, and for Harry, it may be the speaking. Like if that's Harry's core life force generating activity, right? He is never going to get the outcomes, in a different format as he would if he gets a dozen CEOs in the room where he's speaking to them and he's working with them and he's facilitating and coaching and doing all the things. And actually, that could help make it a category of one thing where, hey, everyone's online. My thing is like in person. The thing about what we're talking about is that we don't actually have to do much. The pay to perform business originates from the ego. The pay to exist business originates from God, right? The presupposition here is that each of us came in with a certain design. And that design determines what turns us on and what activities give us crazy levels of life force relative to others or other people, right? We just need to, the question was great. It's like, when in your life, when in your business do you feel that? And how do we pull that thing out and say that, okay, right now I'm doing that like 5% of the time. What would this business look like if I was doing that 50% of the time, right? And what does the architecture of that business need to be? How am I, what's the brand? How am I making contact with the market? Like, how am I acquiring prospects? What offers am I selling? What's the sales process? What's the delivery? Right? We're letting God reorganize the architecture of the business. It's less us, being like, this is what I'm going to do. It's actually surrendering to the original design. Because some people, like one CEO that I work with for like 4 years, um, when we started, business was doing about 5 million a year. And in 4 years, we got it to 115. And then he exited, he sold, I think, 25% of the business for $17 million. And he still owns a big chunk. So it's a private equity exit, so he gets two bites of the apple. His thing was leading, right? His thing was actually twofold: vision and leadership. So we built the whole thing around that. So all he does is create the vision, get juiced up, communicate the vision, and then hire and mold and shape people and develop them so that they can really handle a higher level of responsibility. And that became the primary sort of scaling function of the business. I think of this as founder business fit, right? You could be a level 10 in terms of your skill, but if I put you in a business that's not a fit for you, you'll feel like you're a level 2. And then you'll tell yourself you have all these issues. It's actually just the wrong architecture, right? So there's a huge amount of value that can be unlocked by us pinpointing like, hey, this, when I do this, it feels very different to all these other things, right? How do I do more of this? And how do I connect this to economic value? And that's the simplest way to think about a business, right? This is why my definition for a pay to exist business is building an economic engine around your energy. We're building the engine that takes this energy and turns it into economic value, money, which means the more of this energy I feel, the more money I make. And the highest level of this game is you create a unique game around who you are that you invite them to play inside of, right? Because that's what I'm doing, right? I'm inviting people who are playing what I think is an objectively superior game, or it's a more low-level game. Like, oh, you're just making money? Oh, I'm so sorry for you. But I genuinely am because I meet these people, right? Very successful businesses, and they feel so stuck, so trapped, so like devoid of juice and soul, right? There's only so much of a hit that more money can give.
Mm.
So what if I create a new game and I enroll you into playing this game, which I've done, like now you're, and of course, the way I do it, like in my model, it can only work if it's in your highest interest,
Mm.
right? So that's the highest level of the sale. We're not selling an offer. We're selling a worldview. We're selling a frequency, right? Because like just selling an offer is like nothing wrong with that. That's just a that's the kiddie pool. It's fine when we get started. We gotta learn how to sell by selling something. But most people outgrow that, right? The only game you will not outgrow or get bored of is the one you create based on who you are. And I think this is a really great game for you to create and then invite people into.